When thinking about the most heartbreaking and haunting family-related crimes out there, many of us immediately flash back to the Chris Watts case. It all unfolded in August 2018 in Frederick, Colorado, where Watts' pregnant wife Shanann and their two young daughters, Bella and Celeste, vanished without a trace, only to be discovered as victims in a tragedy that shocked the nation. What hits hardest is how Watts was seen by everyone, neighbors, coworkers, even family, as this mild-mannered, everyday guy, the kind of dad who'd never raise a voice. But digging into it, the triggers seem so ordinary, so relatable: money troubles, household roles, and especially his secret affair. It's the kind of setup that chills you to the core, making you wonder if something like this could quietly brew in any family's home, right under the surface. Until now, the latest revelations, from Watts' own words, keep escalating the shock. What was his real motive driving it all? And did Nichol Kessinger, his mistress, play a role in pushing him toward this unthinkable disaster? Who is Chris Watts? Chris Watts was born in 1985 in North Carolina, and by 2018 he was living in Frederick, Colorado, with his wife Shanann and their two young daughters, Bella born in 2013 and Celeste in 2015. At the time, Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant with their third child, a boy they planned to name Nico. Watts worked as a field technician at Anadarko Petroleum, handling oil field operations, while Shanann evolved in direct sales for Thrive by Lavelle, a health and wellness brand. She often posted about their seemingly happy family life on social media, sharing photos and videos of family outings, the kids' milestones, and their home. But beneath those polished posts, tensions were simmering. We see from the details that emerged later that the marriage had been strained for some time before any affair came into play. Watts himself described his own upbringing in police interviews as relatively stable, but with undercurrents of family discord. He was the quiet, obedient kid in a household where his older sister Jamie, who was about 7 years his senior and turning 40 in 2018, was more rebellious, often clashing with their mother over things like clothes or rules. In his marriage to Shanann, similar dynamics seemed to echo those patterns. Financial pressures were mounting. The couple had accumulated debt, partly from Shannon's investments in her Thrive business, which involved travel and product promotions that added to expenses. Watts felt controlled, as he later put it, with Shanann handling much of the household decisions and finances. By late June 2018, during a Thrive trip to San Diego, Shanann started noticing Watts pulling away. He stopped responding warmly to her affectionate texts, leaving her to plead for him to work on their relationship. She sensed something off, texting him about his distance and begging for reassurance, but Watts brushed it off, claiming work stress or fatigue. These issues weren't new. Friends and family noted the couple had argued about money and Watts' growing dissatisfaction, feeling trapped in a life that revolved around Shanann's social media image and her business ambitions. He began exercising more obsessively, losing weight and focusing on his appearance, which Shanann initially encouraged but later saw as a sign of detachment. What really amplified these marital cracks was Watts' emerging profile as a classic family annihilator, based on research into such cases. These perpetrators are often white, middle-aged men like Watts, who was 33 in 2018, premeditating their acts with motivations rooted in financial woes or family breakdowns. They see themselves as justified, executing crimes in months like August when stress peaks from summer changes or back-to-school pressures. Watts, passive, nice guy, facade, polite, law-abiding, seen by neighbors as a good dad and husband, didn't exempt him. In fact, it's common for these individuals to appear upstanding until the act. His personal issues ran deeper, too. Before the disappearance, Watts sent Shanann a disturbing photo of a life-sized doll wrapped in a sheet, which investigators later viewed as a sick foreshadowing of what he planned. It hinted at premeditation, a twisted signal amid their ongoing arguments about selling the house and separating. His drive seemed tied to escaping debt and starting fresh. But that fresh start wasn't just about freedom. It involved someone new pulling him in another direction. That's where Nichol Kessinger enters the picture, shifting the dynamics in Watts' marriage even further. Born around 1988 in Colorado, Kessinger was about 37 by 2025 with a Bachelor of Science in Geology from Colorado State University in 2013. She worked as a contractor at Anadarko Petroleum, focusing on environmental compliance and field safety. She crossed paths with Watts at the company in June or July 2018, and their affair ignited quickly, lasting about 6 weeks. Kessinger believed Watts was already separating from Shanann, heading toward divorce and splitting assets. She had no idea about the pregnancy. Their relationship was intense but secretive, meeting 4 to 5 times a week, mostly physical, without involving Watts' family or friends. Watts described her to others later as everything my wife wasn't, calling her nice and not a control freak, someone he could make decisions with. He saw her as the forbidden fruit, drawn by the chemistry they shared at work. From the moment Kessinger appeared in his life, Watts' behavior toward Shanann grew increasingly odd, building on the existing tensions. Starting right after that San Diego trip Watts became distant, ignoring Shannon's loving messages or responding coldly. She texted him desperately, asking why he was pulling away and pleading to fix things, but he evaded, hiding the affair completely. By early August, his detachment was palpable. He focused on workouts, work and secret meetings with Kessinger, while Shanann confided in friends about his changes. Shifting to the sequence of the disappearance itself, it unfolded over a tense few weeks leading into that fateful August. Shanann and the girls had flown to North Carolina at the end of June 2018 for a family visit, spending time with both sets of grandparents. Her dad watched the kids initially, and the trip included meetings with Shannon's Thrive promoters and customers there. Watts stayed behind in Colorado, going to work, running, working out, and keeping the house in order. He joined them on July 31, flying out for a week. They drove to Myrtle Beach the next day, staying 4 or 5 days, the girls' first time at the ocean, ecstatic about the waves and sand. Bella's birthday fell on July 17 during the trip, celebrated with a party including jumpy houses. They FaceTimed Watts so he could watch. No party happened back in Colorado since they returned in August. On August 7, they packed up at Shannon's parents' house and flew home, arriving late that night. Back in Frederick, Watts returned to work on August 8. Shanann flew to Arizona on August 10 for a Thrive meeting with her colleague Nichol, leaving Watts with the girls from Friday through Sunday. That weekend, they attended a pool party for Jeremy Lindstrom's son's 4th birthday, a small gathering with a mini pool, balloon bikes, and water balloons. Watts later described it as an awesome day, recalling the kids' faces lighting up, Celeste sneaking a balloon into his pocket and smacking it. They headed home, showered the girls, got them to bed, and Watts waited for updates from Shanann, whose flight was delayed by dust storms in Arizona and crew issues. Originally set to land around 11:00 p.m. on August 12, it didn't arrive about 2:00 a.m. on August 13. The doorbell camera captured her entering at 1:48 a.m. She climbed into bed shortly after. The psychopath's reactions. The tension starts to build right from that afternoon on August 13, 2018. Nicole Atkinson, who is Shanann Watts' close friend and a fellow promoter in her Thrive business, had been expecting to hear from Shanann after her late-night return from a work trip in Arizona. When the morning dragged on without a text or call, Atkinson grew uneasy. Shanann was the type to stay connected, especially with her pack schedule and 2 little girls at home. By around 12:10 p.m., Atkinson decided to swing by the Watts house in Frederick, Colorado, just to check in. She pulled up and noticed Shannon's car still parked in the garage, a detail that should have been reassuring but instead amplified her worry. Peering through the narrow rectangular window, next to the front door, she spotted Shannon's shoes neatly placed inside, as if she'd just stepped in and never left. Atkinson knocked, rang the doorbell, called out, no response. The house felt eerily silent for a place that should have been buzzing with the energy of a mom and her toddlers. That silence gnawed at Atkinson, prompting her to act fast. She pulled out her phone and dialed Chris Watts, who was out at his job site for Anadarko Petroleum, about 45 minutes away. She told him about the unanswered door, the car, the shoes, everything pointing to Shanann being home, but not responding. Watts, from what we can piece together from later accounts, didn't sound overly alarmed on that call. He agreed to head back, but didn't press for more details or suggest rushing over himself right away. Atkinson, not willing to wait, decided this warranted official help. She called the Frederick Police Department, explaining her concerns. Shanann had just flown in late the night before, wasn't answering, and now the house seemed locked up tight with no signs of life. Officers arrived shortly after, but they hit a snag. The front door had a top latch engaged, making it impossible to enter without forcing it, and the outdoor garage keypad wasn't functioning. They waited outside with Atkinson, the minutes stretching out as the summer heat bore down, turning what started as a welfare check into something that felt heavier by the second. Chris Watts finally arrived, pulling up in his work truck and using his remote to open the garage from afar. The group, officers, Atkinson, and Watts, stepped inside, the cool air of the home contrasting with the growing unease. They moved through the rooms methodically, calling out for Shanann, Bella, and Celeste, but met only echoes. The living room looked untouched, the kitchen spotless, no breakfast dishes, no toys scattered from morning play. Shannon's purse sat where she'd likely dropped it, her phone on the couch, silent and powered down. Upstairs, her wedding ring rested on the nightstand, a small but poignant detail that hinted at finality. The officers powered on her phone, and it lit up with a flood of unread messages. Friends checking in, family asking about her trip, all unanswered since the early hours. Atkinson voiced her fears aloud, pointing out how uncharacteristic this was for Shanann, who was always glued to her device for work and family. The police noted everything. The car in the garage with the kids' car seats still installed, the absence of any struggle or forced entry, the overall cleanliness that suggested nothing amiss. Yet everything screamed wrong. They officially logged it as a missing persons case, starting the preliminary paperwork right there in the home, as the reality of 3 people vanishing began to sink in. What stands out in those early moments, as we review the body cam footage and reports, is how Chris Watts navigated the scene with a composure that bordered on detachment. He joined the search without hesitation, walking from room to room, but his movements were measured, his voice steady. No frantic pacing, no raised tone demanding answers. When the officers asked about the morning, Watts recounted a version of events that sounded rehearsed. He'd woken at 4:00 a.m., gotten ready for work, woken Shanann to talk. It was emotional, he said, tears on both sides, as they discussed selling the house and separating. Shanann had mentioned taking the girls to a friend's place later, and he'd left around 5:30 a.m., texting her from work but getting no reply. He shrugged it off as normal. She often prioritized her direct sales contacts over him. But as he spoke, there was no cracking in his voice, no visible tremor in his hands. Experts who've analyzed the footage later noted subtle tells. His arms crossing defensively, brief hand gestures that seemed to deflect rather than engage, eyes darting away during key questions. He suggested Shanann might just be decompressing somewhere safe, maybe at a friend's, but couldn't name who or provide contacts. Vague assurances that hung in the air without substance. Watts even took initiative in ways that seemed helpful but raised quiet red flags. He volunteered to call local hospitals and hotels, checking for any sign of Shanann or the girls, reporting back negatives with the same even tone. When the group discussed checking neighbor Nate's security camera, Watts agreed readily, standing by as the footage played. His truck, backing out early that morning, nothing else unusual, no one leaving with the kids. He admitted the marriage had issues but steered clear of specifics, focusing instead on the possibility that Shanann had left voluntarily, perhaps overwhelmed. All the while, he maintained that good guy image, polite, cooperative, the concerned husband, but without the raw panic you'd expect from a father whose entire family had evaporated. Atkinson, in contrast, was visibly agitated, her worry spilling out in questions and suggestions, highlighting Watts' restraint by comparison. Later that same day, as media caught wind of the disappearance, Watts stepped in front of cameras for an interview, pleading for their return. "I just want them back," he said. His words scripted for sympathy, but the delivery fell flat, his voice monotone, eyes dry, no quaver of desperation. Body language analysts pointed out the inconsistencies, a slight head tilt that mimicked concern but lacked depth. Hands clasped calmly, rather than gesturing wildly. It was as if he was performing grief, checking boxes without the emotional weight, leaving viewers and investigators with a creeping sense that something didn't add up. Diving deeper into why someone like Watts could appear so unflappable in such a crisis brings us to the science behind these reactions, rooted in concepts from psychology and criminology. Psychopaths often exhibit dysfunctional fear responding, a neurological glitch where the brain's alarm system for threats or consequences doesn't fire properly. This means they experience less anxiety in high-stakes situations, avoiding the fight or flight rush that would make most people jittery or emotional. For Watts, this could explain his steady demeanor as police combed his home, no elevated heart rate betraying guilt, just a cool exterior that let him navigate questions without cracking. Sociopaths, often shaped by environmental factors like trauma, neglect, or poverty, share similar traits but with nuances. Unlike innate psychopaths, sociopaths might develop their detachment through life experiences, leading to a lack of empathy and a cold exterior. Both groups excel at maintaining poise, but sociopaths can be more impulsive, while psychopaths plan meticulously. For Watts, whether leaning psychopathic or sociopathic, this explains the eerie tranquility, no empathy-driven breakdown over his missing family, just a calculated front. Linking it directly to his behavior, that bodycam footage captures it. Watts answering succinctly, avoiding eye contact at pivotal moments. His body language screaming deception through subtle cues like fidgeting hands when pressed on details. The science underscores how these traits enable not just the crime, but the cover-up, turning a family's disappearance into a performance where Watts played the lead without missing a beat. Watts and Kessinger's testimony. Follow the prior raid. The suspicion really starts ramping up between August 14 and 15, 2018, turning what began as a missing persons report into a full-blown investigation, with Watts squarely in the crosshairs. It all kicks off that evening on the 14th, when Watts voluntarily heads to the Frederick Police Department for his first formal interview. He's meeting with lead investigator Detective Dave Bamover and Detective Graham Coder. Sitting in a standard interrogation room under those harsh fluorescent lights. Watts doesn't come across as defensive at first, he seems cooperative. But as he starts talking, the details he provides begin to feel off. He describes the morning of the 13th in a straightforward way. He woke up around 4:00 a.m., got ready for work, and then had what he calls an emotional conversation with Shanann about their marriage falling apart. He says they discussed selling the house and separating, both of them crying during the talk. According to Watts, Shanann mentioned she'd take the girls to a friend's house later that day and be back eventually. He left for work around 5:30 a.m., texted her from the job site, but didn't hear back, which he claims was normal, because she always prioritized responding to her Thrive customers over him. We see in the interview transcripts and footage that Watts sticks to this story, insisting Shanann and the kids must have gone out for the day. He suggests she's probably just decompressing. Somewhere safe, maybe at a friend's place, but he can't name any specific friend or provide contact info when pressed. It's this vagueness that starts to poke holes right away. The logic doesn't hold up. For one, the neighbor Nate's security camera footage, which police had already reviewed by then, only shows Watts backing his truck out of the driveway early that morning. There's no sign of Shanann or the girls leaving the house at all. The home itself was spotless when checked earlier, with all their personal items like the car seats, purse, phone, and even Shannon's wedding ring left behind, nothing indicating she'd packed up and taken off voluntarily with the kids. Watts maintains a calm demeanor throughout, lacking the intense emotion you'd expect, with body language that experts later break down as evasive, hands gesturing minimally, eyes shifting away during key questions about the timeline. He acknowledges marital problems, mentioning financial stress and emotional strain, but he completely omits any mention of his affair, steering the conversation toward the idea that Shanann might have just needed space. The next morning, on August 15, things shift dramatically when the HR manager from Anadarko Petroleum reaches out to the Frederick police. This call comes in early, providing a crucial piece of the puzzle: confirmation that Chris Watts has been involved in an affair with a coworker named Nichol Kessinger. The HR report stems from internal observations at the company, where both worked, Watts as a field technician and Kessinger as an environmental contractor. This revelation gives investigators a potential motive, suggesting Watts might have wanted to start fresh with his mistress, which directly undermines his narrative of a simple marital spat, leading to Shanann's voluntary disappearance. It's a turning point. Up until then, Watts' story had some superficial plausibility, but now police have evidence of something he's actively hiding, making his entire account suspect from the start. Police had already started doubting Watts right after that first interview on the 14th, spotting inconsistencies that screamed deception. His claim that Shanann took the kids out doesn't match the physical evidence, no one seen leaving on camera, all essentials left behind, the house too clean as if staged. Then there's the body language. Avoiding direct eye contact when detailing the emotional conversation, waving his hands in a way that seems to deflect rather than explain, and a monotone voice that stays flat even when describing tears and heartbreak. according to FBI deception detection principles. These are classic cues, nonverbal signals like reduced emotional expression and vague responses that don't align with expected behavior. Watt's unnatural calm stands out too. Most parents in his position would show raw panic, but he lacks that distress, coming off more like someone reciting a script. Hiding the affair is another red flag. He doesn't mention Kessinger at all, yet the HR tip confirms it, pointing to a concealed motive. His story about the timeline feels forced. Shanann arrives home, exhausted at 200 a.m., yet they supposedly have this deep, tearful talk at 400 a.m. before he leaves. It doesn't add up. Investigators cross-reference with Shannon's like Atkinson, who confirm Watts isn't providing specific details about this alleged friend's house, further exposing the gaps. That same day, on the 15th, the FBI arranges a private meeting with Nichol Kessinger in a nearby park to take her statement, keeping it avoid media attention and maintain secrecy. Kessinger shows up willingly, handing over her phone, texts, and search history without hesitation. She describes meeting Watts at Anadarko in June or July 2018, starting the affair believing he was already divorcing Shanann and splitting assets. She swears she had no clue about the pregnancy. In the recorded audio from the FBI and CBI interview, Kessinger expresses genuine shock at the developments, saying she grew suspicious of Watts' calm attitude after he texted her that his family was gone. On the 13th, she cut off contact right after the disappearance hit the news, providing a detailed timeline of their meetings and communications that helps build the case against Watts. Her cooperation seems thorough, but as we'll get into, some aspects raise eyebrows. Looking back at what Chris had lied about in those early statements, it's a web of deceptions that builds outrage the more you unpack it. He fabricates the emotional conversation with tears, but later confessions reveal that's when he actually strangled Shanann. His calm retelling feels infuriating, like he's mocking the tragedy with feigned concern. Claiming Shanann took the kids out is blatantly illogical given the evidence, and his casual suggestion that she's decompressing comes off as dismissive, showing no real worry for his daughter's safety. Hiding the affair is perhaps the most narcissistic move, treating his family as disposable obstacles to a new life. He downplays not hearing from her as normal, but Shanann was known for being responsive, making his psychopathic calm in the footage all the more enraging. No breakdown, no urgency, just a nice guy act to manipulate sympathy. His media interview plea, "I just want them back," rings hollow with that even tone and dry eyes, provoking anger knowing he caused it all without remorse. Focusing on Kessinger, a key point is how she deleted her search history and some messages before meeting police, though investigators recovered parts through warrants from Google and Verizon. Her searches include, "Did people hate Amber Frey?" referring to the mistress in the Scott Peterson case, along with, "Amber Frey book deal. Man I'm having affair with says he will leave his wife. Marrying your mistress. Wedding dresses. Who to prepare for anal sex. Double penetration. And how much do oil and gas workers make?" There's no record of searches like, "Can my boyfriend kill his wife?" or anything directly incriminating. Those seem like rumors, but the existing ones show her worrying about the fallout from being a mistress, perhaps anticipating scrutiny. Kessinger told the FBI she didn't know Chris had a family, at first, insisting he portrayed himself as nearly divorced. But recapping her statements, she details meeting him at work in June or July 2018, starting the physical affair believing his marriage was over, unaware of the pregnancy. She expresses shock at the events, suspects his calmness, and cuts ties after his family gone text, providing timelines that aid the case. Emphasizing the lie claiming she didn't know Chris had a family doesn't hold up against searches like, "Man I'm having affair with says he will leave his wife," which clearly indicates she knew he was married. Deleting messages and searches suggests an attempt to hide, and her lookups on Amber Frey, another mistress in a high-profile murder, show awareness of potential parallels, positioning herself in a risky spot. Despite the controversy in her statements, from the deletions to the apparent lie about not knowing his family status, Kessinger was never treated as a suspect, only a witness. Her full cooperation, lack of direct evidence linking her to the crimes, and the focus on Watts led police to clear her quickly. The investigation centered on him, with her identity protected initially. True crime communities debated heavily, some believing her searches and Watts' later accusations imply more knowledge, but no official evidence supports that. The polygraph. The climax came with the 9-hour interrogation and polygraph on August 15, 2018. Stand out as the pivotal moment where everything starts to crack open. Watts walks into that room at the Frederick Police Department that morning, confident he's got this under control. He's already given his first statement the night before, sticking to his story, and he figures his nice guy persona will carry him through. His dad has just flown in from North Carolina, and they're en route together, with Watts thinking this polygraph is just a formality to clear his name and let him walk out free. He sits down across from Agent Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, unaware that she's about to dismantle his lies piece by piece. Lee starts slow, building rapport, explaining the process in a way that makes him feel at ease. But she's laying traps from the get-go. She tells him outright, if you had anything to do with their disappearance, it would be really stupid for you to come in and take a polygraph today. It's a psychological jab, forcing him to double down on his innocence, because backing out now would scream guilt. She reassures him repeatedly that this test will help eliminate him from the suspect list if he's telling the truth, giving him that false sense of security while subtly reminding him of the stakes. The polygraph kicks off after some preliminary questions, and Watts goes through it, answering about whether he knows what happened to Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. But the results come back devastating. He fails completely, with reactions off the charts. Lee describes it as one of the worst performances she's seen, calling the test very bad in her notes. The graphs from the machine show strong physiological spikes every time he's asked if he hurt Shanann, if he knows where Bella and Cece are, or if he's hiding something. His heart rate jumps, skin conductance changes, breathing patterns shift in ways that scream deception. It's one of the clearest polygraph results the CBI has ever recorded, with no ambiguity. His body is betraying him even as his words try to hold the line. This is the turning point of the entire investigation, the moment where Watts' carefully constructed facade starts crumbling under the weight of undeniable evidence from his own responses. Before the polygraph even begins, Watts is clinging to his first version of events, the one he thinks will buy him time. This is the story he laid out in his initial interview the night before on August 14, when he still believed he could fool everyone. He describes the morning of the 13th in detail. He says he and Shanann had an emotional conversation, not an argument, where they talked about their failing marriage, the possibility of selling the house, and separating. Both of them claims, and Shanann mentioned she'd take Bella and Cece to a friend's house later that day. He went to work like normal, leaving around 5:30 a.m. after packing his lunch and gear, texting her from the site, but getting no reply, which he brushes off as typical, because she always put her Thrive business first. When Nicole Atkinson showed up at the house that afternoon, Watts says he didn't know anything was wrong at first, suggesting Shanann was probably fine and maybe just hiding from stress. But the body cam footage from that welfare check tells a different story. Watts stands there with his hands in his pockets, evasive in his answers, showing no real worry or urgency as police and Atkinson search the house. The core of this first lie is Watts trying to paint a picture of non-involvement. I left the house at 5 a.m. The kids were still alive when I left. I'm not connected to this. He pushes the narrative that Shanann took the girls out herself, perhaps overwhelmed by their marital issues. But it's all falling apart under scrutiny. There's no camera footage showing Shanann leaving the house, no Uber records or any car departing after Watts. Shanann left behind her phone, purse, shoes, and wedding ring. There's no reason she'd take the kids without those essentials, especially as a pregnant woman with toddlers. His motive for this version seems clear: avoid responsibility, hide his affair with Nichol Kessinger, buy precious time, and hope police buy into the idea of a voluntary disappearance. It's a desperate bid to shift blame without admitting anything, but the inconsistencies pile up, making his calm delivery all the more suspicious. Once the polygraph results hit, and Lee hits him with, "Chris, you did not pass the test," the shift is immediate and visceral. Watts' hands start shaking, his breathing turns heavy and ragged. He leans forward on the table for support, his composure shattering in real time. That's when he pivots to his second version of the story, the one designed to mitigate the damage. He claims he came home that morning and saw Shanann hurting one of the girls, either Bella or Cece. In a panic, he says he went crazy, lost control, and hurt Shanann in response because he was so shocked. He then loaded all the remains into his truck and drove them out to the Survey 319 oil site, where he worked, hiding them there. This version comes pouring out right after the failure, as if he's grasping for anything to lessen the blow. But this second account is just another layer of deception, quickly unraveling under forensic scrutiny. The evidence doesn't match at all. There's no sign that Shanann attacked the children, no injuries on the remains consistent with harming them, and then being overpowered. The girl's wounds fit being hurt by an adult, and the compression marks on Shannon's neck prove Watts actively hurt her, not some reactive scuffle. The house shows no noise disturbances, no messed up furniture or signs of a struggle that night. From a criminal psychology standpoint, this is a classic tactic in family annihilator cases, blaming the dead wife to reduce the perception of premeditation, turning a calculated act into something impulsive. Watts chooses this version to downgrade his crime from deliberately killing three to a crime of passion or self-defense, avoiding the label of child killer, which he fears for the social repercussions in prison. It also helps hide his real motive tied to the affair with Kessinger, steering away from the image of a man who hurt his wife to be free with his mistress. He probably thought this was the most swallowable story for police, but the forensics completely reject it, exposing it as yet another fabrication. During this phase, Kessinger's role comes into sharper focus as the polygraph failure prompts police to zero in on the affair as a central motive. Watts' lies crumbling under the test highlight how his relationship with her could have driven him to eliminate his family for a fresh start. But notably, Kessinger herself isn't subjected to a polygraph. Her interview happens separately, and while she cooperates, the investigation doesn't push through the same rigorous lie detection. Another big gap here is the unrecovered WhatsApp messages between them. Police didn't seize or analyze those communications, leaving a potential hole in understanding if she knew more or influenced him. This oversight becomes a point of contention later, as it might have revealed more about their dynamic and any discussions around his marriage. The polygraph itself is the psychological hammer that breaks Watts, a tool that's more about leverage than infallible science, but in this case, it works like a charm. Lee's setup, reassuring him it'll clear him while warning that lying will show, builds that tension, and when the failure hits, it's the catalyst for his shift. Those graph spikes on questions about hurting Shanann or knowing the girl's location seal it, proving his body's reactions don't lie even if he does. It's this moment that transforms the case from missing persons to murder, with Watts' versions evolving under pressure, each one more desperate than the last. We can't overlook how the interrogation unfolds hour by hour, Lee methodically chipping away. She starts with basics about his life, family, and the disappearance, getting him comfortable before hooking up the sensors. Watts answers the control questions fine, but the relevant ones, did you hurt Shanann? Do you know where the girls are? Trigger those massive responses. After the test, she confronts him gently at first, then firmly, watching him squirm as the reality sets in. His first version, the one about not knowing and Shanann taking the kids, was his shield before the polygraph, but now it's exposed as baseless. The second, blaming Shanann, is his fallback, but it's equally flawed. Ignoring the lack of struggle evidence and his own premeditated actions, like the doll photo he sent days earlier. This interrogation isn't just about the lies, it's about Watts unraveling in real time, from confident entry to broken confessions, all driven by that failed test. The details paint a picture of a man cornered, his stories shifting to save face, but ultimately failing against the weight of truth. The incomplete confession. The end of this duel all starts unraveling on August 15, 2018, right after he fails the polygraph test at the Frederick Police Department. In that moment, under pressure from Agent Tammy Lee, Watts finally admits to hurting Shanann as the second version we heard previously. Watts then guides the investigators to the Survey 319 oil site, marking the locations of the remains on aerial photos of the area. The remains are recovered the next day, on August 16. Shanann in a shallow grave, and Bella and Celeste inside separate oil tanks. This confession marks the shift from a missing persons case to a confirmed tragedy, but it's just the beginning of Watts peeling back his stories. Fast forward to February 18, 2019, when Watts is interviewed in prison in Wisconsin by agents from the FBI, CBI, and Frederick Police Department. This is where he drops the lay in Shanann entirely and admits to hurting all of them. He goes into detail about the night, after Shanann returns home late from her trip, They have an intimate moment followed by a conversation about their failing marriage and divorce. Watts says he hurt Shanann on the bed during this talk. Then Bella walks into the room asking, "What is wrong with mommy?" He loads Shannon's remains onto the floor of his work truck, with the girls, who were still alive at that point, sitting in the back. During the drive, he reflects on what he's done, but presses on. In the interview, Watts breaks down in tears, saying, "Wasn't thinking. If I was thinking, none of this would have happened." He mentions feeling like something else was controlling him, some external force, but he owns up to actions, acknowledging the choices he made. This session lasts hours, with Watts providing a timeline that investigators use to cross-check evidence. And it's clear he's no longer hiding behind partial truths. By June 2021, in letters from prison, Watts opened up even more, admitting he had been planning this for weeks. He reveals giving Shanann medication to cause her to lose their baby, thinking it would make things easier for his new life with his affair partner. He even tried to hurt the girls at home, but couldn't follow through initially, and he considered ending his own life out of remorse but didn't. These letters show a man grappling with his decisions after the fact, but they underscore how deliberate his steps were leading up to that night. His motives tie back to the affair with Kessinger, financial burdens like debt from Shannon's business, and a desire to escape his current life for something new. His Google searches, hidden in a calculator app, and a $6 a restaurant charge with Kessinger add to the picture of deliberate steps. Watts keeps photos of his family in his cell, talking to them daily, and even reading books as if to CC, a ritual that speaks to his lingering connection, but doesn't erase the players, appearing on shows like Dr. Phil, relay that Watts confessed to hurting Shanann after an argument about divorce. With Bella entering the room afterward, he told her Shanann was sick, before loading everything into the truck. Audio from these prison clarifies the night further, with Watts recounting Bella's last words as, "Daddy, no." Something he says he hears in his mind every day. The events at Survey 319 unfold in a remote, industrial setting that Watts knew well from his job at Anadarko. He drives the 45 minutes out with Shannon's remains on the truck floor and the girls in the back, no car seats, just sitting quietly as the landscape rolls by. A heartbroken detail here was that Bella, having seen what happened, asks, "What happened to Cece? And, is the same thing gonna happen to me as Cece?" Watts doesn't recall his exact response, but he proceeds to do what he did with her sister. After finishing the disposal in a separate tank, he places Shanann in a shallow grave nearby. Watts returns to work near Survey 319 the very next day, August 14, spending time close to where he'd left them, a chilling detail that shows his ability to compartmentalize. Neighbors' security camera footage captures him loading gas cans into his truck early on the 13th, backing into the garage to load victims without being seen. The recovery happens on the 16th. Shanann at 5:00 a.m., Celeste at 30:40 p.m., Bella at 5:50 p.m. Each step confirming the horror of what he'd done. He even actively covered his tracks, cleaning the house spotless, giving media interviews, feigning worry without real remorse at first, though later expressing some regret but still lying in early statements. At Survey, he even considered ending it all out of guilt but chose not to, feeling like something else was in control, yet his actions remain his own deliberate choices from start to finish. We see in the details how Watts' planning extended to the disposal. Choosing Survey because he knew the layout, the tank's hatches, and how to access it without suspicion. His work truck, the early morning timing, the gas cans, all point to forethought. The way he placed the victims and returned to normal routines shows control, not chaos. Letters and interviews reveal he weighed options like the medication attempt, showing calculation over impulse. This wasn't a snap decision, it was a series of active steps he took, from the home to the site, affirming his role as the planner and executor throughout. The audio captures his reflections on Bella's words, a haunting reminder he carries, but it doesn't change the premeditated nature. He hurt them all step by step, on his terms. As we keep compiling the details on this Chris Watts case for the channel, it's fascinating and disturbing how his story has evolved over the years, especially from 2020 to 2024, when he started crafting these new versions that directly pin blame on Nichol Kessinger as more than just a temptress. Back in 2019 and 2020, his accusations were more about her being the spiritual corrupter, like calling her a Jezebel or harlot. In those early prison letters, framing her as the one who led him astray with sweet words that clouded his judgment. But as time went on, Watts ramped it up, turning her into an active participant in his narratives. We see this shift in the letters he wrote to fellow inmates or pen pals, which got leaked through outlets like the Daily Mail and Newshin around 2024 and 2025. It's like he couldn't stick to one story, and each iteration pulls Kessinger deeper into the blame to make himself look less culpable. For instance, in what we'd call version 3, spanning roughly 2020 to 2023 in his prison correspondence, Watts began claiming that Nichol Kessinger was present at the house on the morning of August 13, 2018. He implied she witnessed or even took part in the events surrounding the disappearance, suggesting her involvement right there at the scene, though he never fleshed it out with any real specifics. Then, by 2024 and into 2025, he escalated to version 4 in those recent reports and letters, asserting that Nichol and her friend Jim helped me dispose of the bodies at Survey 319. He positioned them as accomplices in covering up the crime, helping with the aftermath at the oil site. These claims popped up in his writings, sent to people outside, getting picked up by the media, and stirring up fresh debates in true crime circles. Watts described Kessinger as this wicked woman, who not only led him down the wrong path, but actively joined in, expanding her role from a passive seducer to someone hands-on in the deception. It's a pattern we notice in his communications, starting subtle and building to these bold accusations, all while he's sitting in protective custody at Dodge Correctional Institution, working as a custodian and dealing with his daily routine. The timing aligns with his so-called religious transformation, where he quotes Bible verses like 2 Corinthians 5:17 about being a new creature, but weaves in these blames to rewrite his past. Every time Watts rolls out these accusations, though, they fall flat because there's zero substance to back them up. He never provides specific times, like what hour Kessinger supposedly showed up at the house, or when Jim got involved in the disposal. It's all vague, hand-wavy claims, without a timeline that could be checked against phone records or alibis. There's no mention of witnesses either. No one from the neighborhood, no coworkers, no security footage placing her or Jim at the scene. We know from the original investigation that neighbor Nate's camera only captured Watts' truck movements that morning, no other vehicles or people showing up. Forensic evidence at Survey 319 doesn't match either. The site was processed thoroughly, and there's no DNA, fingerprints, or physical traces linking Kessinger or Jim to the area. Everything points to Watts acting alone in handling the aftermath. He doesn't offer any GPS data or maps to prove their presence, like location pings from her phone or vehicle tracks that could corroborate the story. Legally, these claims hold no weight. They're seen as fabrications from a convicted prisoner trying to deflect, and the Weld County DA hasn't reopened the case based on them, dismissing them as unreliable rants from someone with nothing to lose. Despite all that, public suspicion around Kessinger hasn't died down, fueled by these lingering gray areas from the original probe. For starters, she deleted her entire search history and some messages before meeting with police on August 15, 2018, which raised eyebrows even though investigators recovered parts through warrants from Google and Verizon. It suggests an effort to clean up her digital trail, making people wonder what else might have been there. She only handed over her main phone, without mentioning any secondary devices or accounts that could have held more evidence, leaving gaps in what was examined. Unlike Watts, she wasn't subjected to a polygraph test. Despite being a key witness tied to his motive, the investigation didn't require it, which some see as a bias or oversight in treating her statements at face value. She told police she didn't know Chris had a family, at first, believing he was divorcing, but her searches like, "Man I'm having an affair with says he will leave his wife," directly contradict that, proving she knew he was married. Those Google searches in general sparked debate, things like, did people hate Amber Frey? So comparing to the mistress in the Scott Peterson case. Amber Frey book deal, marrying your mistress, wedding dresses, and how much do oil and gas workers make? Implies she was thinking about the long-term fallout of being involved with a married man, perhaps even anticipating scrutiny in a high-profile scenario. The missing WhatsApp messages between her and Watts are another big hole. Police didn't recover them, potentially overlooking discussions about his marriage or plans that could have clarified her knowledge. Experts and former law enforcement we've talked to on the channel believe the investigation into Kessinger was never fully complete, pointing to how rushed the whole case was. wrapped up in just 86 days from disappearance to sentencing. They didn't interview her as rigorously as Watts, skipping the polygraph and not seizing all possible devices, with the focus laser locked on him from the start. There's no full data recovery on everything, no cross-check of her GPS or location data for the morning of August 13 to definitively rule her out. These deletions and searches suggest possible foreknowledge, or at least more awareness than admitted, leading some to call for a reopening to clear up any involvement once and for all. Watts' 2025 accusations, claiming her and Jim as accomplices, only amp up the doubt, even without proof. The DA in Weld County hasn't acted, but scripts from true crime videos and briefs, like that 100-page one plan for the new DA in 2029, keep pushing the narrative that something was missed. Watts' purpose in all this blaming seems pretty clear when we look at the pattern. By painting Kessinger as the wicked instigator, he dodges full accountability, reducing his role to that of a weak guy who fell victim to temptation. He even says he takes full responsibility in letters, but immediately attributes the trigger to her influence. It helps him maintain this image he's built in prison as a reformed, new man, forgiven by God, positioning her as the biblical villain to spiritually justify what happened. In those writings, the blame eases his guilt, framing the events as a consequence of her sweet words of destruction, rather than his own choices, like a coping mechanism amid his isolation. The 2025 letters tie into his fan mail and jail celebrity vibe, using the accusations to draw attention and engage correspondence, keeping his story alive in the media. Ultimately, it's about manipulating the narrative, shifting focus from his premeditation to some external force, which fits the deflection tactics we see in family annihilator cases. The way Watts' attitude toward Nichol has flipped over time really exposes his character as narcissistic and sociopathic at the core. Back in the 2018 affair period, he was all positive, idealizing her as the forbidden fruit. And everything my wife wasn't. She was the nice one. Not controlling, his escape route and potential new partner for a fresh start. He saw her as the perfect contrast to his life with Shanann, someone to build chemistry with at work. Right after the events, in those 2018 texts, he even messaged her, "I didn't hurt my family," to keep the connection going and cover his tracks, treating her like an ally he needed to reassure. But by early prison years, 2019-2020, it shifts negative. He starts calling her a Jezebel and harlot, viewing her as this evil temptress who corrupted his soul and led him into sin. Then, in the later phase from 2024 to 2025, it escalates further to labeling her a wicked woman who messled him, even accusing her of direct complicity with Jim in the aftermath. This change proves how manipulative he is, treating people like Kessinger as disposable tools, idealized when she served his affair and motive, then demonized when he needs a scapegoat for blame and deflection. It's a lack of empathy at its finest, with fake remorse in his letters, while he shifts the guilt onto her. To him, Nichol starts as the perfect escape from his marriage, becomes an Ervil, forced to absolve his actions, and ends up as a mere scapegoat. Ultimately just a harlot Jezebel, symbol of temptation. Not a real person with her own life, but an object he twists for his ever-changing narrative to suit his needs. As we continue gathering the latest on the Chris Watts case for our channel, it's clear that the story isn't over yet, even 7 years after the events in Frederick, Colorado. Right now, as of late 2025, Chris Watts is serving multiple life sentences without parole at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, where he's been since December 2018 for safety reasons. He's in protective custody, working as a custodian, staying fit with regular exercise, and dealing with minor infractions like unauthorized communication in 2020 banned in 2021. Meanwhile, Nichol Kessinger remains free, never charged with anything. She was treated as a witness from the start, cooperating fully by providing her phone, texts, and search history back in 2018. She's essentially disappeared from public view, likely changing her name and relocating, with unconfirmed sightings like one at a Montana funeral in April 2025. The case file itself feels incomplete to many of us following it closely. The entire investigation wrapped up in just 86 days from the disappearance to Watts' guilty plea, leaving gaps that true crime communities keep poking at, especially around Kessinger's role and whether everything was fully explored. Looking ahead, January 14, 2029, stands out as a potentially game-changing date because that's when a new district attorney takes office in Weld County, Colorado. We've seen in similar cases how a fresh DA can revisit old files, and experts we've talked to believe this could be the moment the Watts case gets another look. the focus wouldn't be on overturning Watts' conviction. He's locked in for life. But on tying up loose ends, particularly those involving Kessinger. For the first time, her part could get a thorough re-examination, digging into aspects that felt rough in 2018. That might mean subpoenaing unretrieved data like WhatsApp messages between her and Watts, any overlooked emails, or GPS records from her phone or car on August 13, 2018. We've heard from former investigators that these elements were never fully pouring the original probe, and a new DA might prioritize them to either confirm there's nothing there or uncover something missed. It's not about letting Watts off the hook. Legally, his guilt is sealed. But if evidence points to anyone else's involvement, no matter how minor, the statute of limitations on related charges like accessory, after the fact could still allow action, depending on the findings. The legal implications here are huge, even if subtle. A new DA could decide to affirm that Kessinger is completely clear, releasing it a report to shut down the rumors once and for all, based on a review of the existing evidence. Or, they might opt to open a limited reinvestigation, pulling in those missing digital trails to ensure no stone was left unturned. We've seen this in other high-profile cases where public pressure builds over time, leading to supplemental probes that don't change the main conviction but address peripheral doubts. For Watts, nothing changes, he can't appeal his way out, and his life sentences stand firm. But for Kessinger, it could mean either closure or renewed scrutiny, depending on what, if anything, turns up. The point is, 2029 represents a fresh start for the office, and with the case's notoriety, the incoming DA will likely face expectations to at least acknowledge the lingering questions, perhaps through a formal review to maintain public trust in the system. What's fueling all this anticipation is the shift in public pressure since 2018. Back then, the case moved so fast that many details got glossed over, but over the past 7 years, the true crime community has dug deep, uncovering new data and raising pointed questions. We've seen forums and podcasts analyzing Kessinger's timeline that morning. Where was she exactly? And does it line up perfectly? People have compared Watts' evolving statements year by year, from his initial confessions to those 2025 letters where he accuses her and her friend Jim of helping with the aftermath at Survey 319. Forensic gaps get highlighted too, like why certain digital records weren't fully recovered or cross-checked. This has built a groundswell demanding transparency, with petitions and online campaigns calling for the full release of unredacted files or a second look at overlooked angles. Unlike 2018, when the focus was solely on Watts' quick guilty plea to avoid the death penalty, now the narrative includes these what-ifs about third-party involvement, amplified by social media and documentaries. A new DA in 2029 will walk into that environment, facing much stronger scrutiny from a community that's had years to dissect every inconsistency. If the new DA chooses not to act, the doubts could linger indefinitely, keeping the case in a state of perpetual controversy. Without a review, suspicions about Kessinger might only grow, with more amateur sleuths poring over her deleted searches or unrecovered messages, fueling theories that she knew more than she let on. Watts, from his cell, could keep dropping new versions in his letters, like those 2040-25 claims, stirring the pot and drawing media attention that prolongs the pain for the victims' families. The community might label this as another case where a potential third party was overlooked, eroding faith in the original investigation's thoroughness. We've seen similar situations in other cases where inaction leads to ongoing speculation, turning what should be closed into an open wound. But 2029 offers a chance to either seal the history by confirming everything was handled or reopen select parts to address the omissions, ensuring no questions remain unanswered. This emphasis on 2029 isn't about exonerating Watts. He's unequivocally guilty, as all evidence and his own admissions confirm. But if there are loose ends or investigative gaps, clearing them up is about justice in full, making sure the record is complete. The video scripts and expert opinions we've reviewed stress this. Watts bears 100% of the responsibility, but verifying no one else was involved, even peripherally, honors the process. As we approach that date, it's a pivotal year that could either put the debates to rest or reignite them, depending on how the new DA handles the pressure. The lesson. As we wrap up our look at the Chris Watts case on the channel, we've spent time piecing together the facts, the lies, and the lingering questions. But now it's worth stepping back to draw some lessons from this tragedy. When we think about family conflicts that escalate into devastating incidents, it's hard not to see patterns where husbands or partners end up as the central figures causing harm. In the US alone, statistics show that over 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have faced some form of intimate partner hurt in their lifetime, with many cases rooted in everyday household disputes that spiral out of control. Globally, the numbers are even more staggering. Around 840 million women have experienced partner mistreatment over their lives, and reports indicate that every 10 minutes, a woman's harmed by an intimate partner or family member. These aren't isolated events. They're part of a broader trend where domestic tensions boil over, often with the male partner initiating the cycle. We've seen similar dynamics in countless cases we cover, where what starts as arguments over money or roles turns into something irreversible, affecting not just the immediate family but rippling out to communities. Digging into the causes behind this trend in modern society, it often traces back to deep-seated issues like gender inequality, where unequal power dynamics in relationships create fertile ground for conflict. Societal norms still push ideas of masculinity that emphasize control or dominance, leading some men to respond to stress with aggression when they feel their authority challenged. Financial pressures play a big role too, in today's economy, with rising costs and job instability. Disputes over money can escalate quickly, turning minor disagreements into major rifts. We also see how poor communication and lack of understanding exacerbate things. In a world of constant digital distractions and work demands, couples often don't address underlying resentments until they explode. Cultural factors add another layer. In some communities, beliefs about family roles or stigma around seeking help prevent early intervention, while external stressors like substance use or mental health issues, though not direct causes, can amplify existing tensions. Social isolation is a silent contributor as well, with more people moving away from support networks. There's less outside perspective to spot warning signs before they worsen. In the Watts case, we observed how financial strains and shifting roles mirrored these broader societal problems, showing how everyday pressures can build without notice. When it comes to who bears responsibility for these kinds of incidents, the immediate answer points to the perpetrators themselves. They make the choices that lead to harm, and accountability starts there. But societal views complicate this. Many cultures still harbor attitudes that subtly justify or minimize male aggression, rooted in outdated ideas about gender roles where men are seen as heads of households with unchecked authority. Stigma plays a huge part too. Victims often face blame or disbelief, with questions like, why didn't they leave? Shifting focus from the annihilator's actions to the victim's decisions, which discourages reporting and perpetuates the cycle. On a broader level, institutions share the load. Law enforcement sometimes underestimates risks in domestic calls, while communities and workplaces might overlook signs due to privacy concerns or lack of training. Even media and public discourse can contribute by sensationalizing cases without addressing root causes, reinforcing stereotypes that make prevention harder. In our reviews of similar incidents, we've noted how this collective blindness, from family members ignoring red flags to policymakers underfunding support, allows these situations to fester, making society as a whole complicit in not doing enough to intervene early. Turning to solutions, there's a range of approaches that could make a difference, starting with education and awareness campaigns to shift societal norms of gender equality and healthy relationships. Programs in schools and workplaces teaching communication skills and conflict resolution from a young age could help prevent escalations, while community resources like hotlines and counseling need more funding to reach those in need. Legal measures are key too. Stronger enforcement of protective orders, better training for police on recognizing domestic risks, and policies addressing economic factors, like affordable housing to reduce financial stress on families. Digital tools are emerging as well, with apps and online platforms for anonymous reporting or support, especially as online harassment becomes part of the problem. International efforts, like the UN's 16 Days of Activism, highlight the need for global coordination to tackle cultural drivers, pushing for laws that promote women's rights and reduce inequality. But challenges abound. Funding shortages are a major hurdle. In the U.S., without consistent federal support, many shelters and services struggle to operate, leaving gaps in help for survivors. Stigma remains a barrier, deterring victims from seeking aid and perpetrators from getting therapy, while regressions in rights, like restrictions on reproductive health, can exacerbate power imbalances. Cultural resistance in some areas slows progress, and the rise of digital problems adds complexity, requiring new laws and tech-savvy interventions that aren't always in place. Underreporting is another issue, with many incidents hidden due to fear or shame, making it hard to allocate resources effectively. In reflecting on cases like this, we have to ask ourselves, what signs are we missing in our own circles that could prevent the next one? And that's where we'll wrap up our analysis for today on the Chris Watts case. We've covered the timeline, the lies, the confessions, and those lingering suspicions. But even after all this, there are still mysteries and contradictions that beg for answers, like the full extent of any overlooked connections, or why certain evidence gaps persist. We'll dive deeper into those in our next video. Thanks for watching, hit that like and subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this, and we'll see you soon.